from the Department of Communication in Phillipsburg. This is a special edition of Inside Government with Cedric Peterson.
To our audience here at home and around the world, you are now Inside Government. In this special edition of the program, I'm thrilled to introduce a new series on fostering resilient crisis management. Providing you a little backstory, on the 16th of May of 2022, the government of St. Martin, in collaboration with VNG International, launched a groundbreaking initiative, Fostering Resilient Crisis Management, FRCM program. Now, St. Martin goes without saying, we face frequent and varied crises, from hurricanes and floods to the looming threats of earthquakes and tsunamis. Now, despite notable improvements in crisis management, since Hurricane Irma, effective information management remains a critical weakness. Now, this aspect is essential for ensuring efficient coordination among all crisis response teams and how we effectively communicate with you, the general public of St. Martin. Now, VNG International has been actively involved in St. Martin's recovery and reconstruction efforts post-Hurricane Irma. FRCM is a technical assistance program implemented by VNG International in cooperation with the government of St. Martin and funded by EU RESEMBID. Now, to help me delve into this initiative that has been designed to transform crisis management and resilience in St. Martin, my guests are two VNGI representatives, Ms. Eline Vermeer and Mr. Marciano Johns. Eline and Marciano, it's great to have you in the program.
Thank you for having us.
Before we get into the topic, I want to give both Marciano and Elena the opportunity to introduce themselves. Ladies first, Elena, give us some insight. Where are you from, educational background, and your professional background?
Thank you very much. I'm Eline. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm currently living in Amsterdam. Have lived there for a long time already. And my background is in history. I studied history of international cooperation, which is what was also the reason for me to join VNG International after my studies, because VNG International is a company that does international cooperation, mainly focused on strengthening governments in other countries, mostly local governments, but also ministries. And it's really based on the idea of sharing expertise between colleagues on one side of the ocean and on the other. And it's a topic that interests me very much.
Well, thank you very much for that. Marciano, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you. My name is Marciano, and I'm born in the Netherlands, but have my roots from Suriname. And I have a background, first of all, in international business and languages. But after some years of working for a commercial organization as a project manager, I decided I wanted to focus more on a field with societal focus and benefit. So I also did a master in political science, focusing on international relations. In the end, I also found VNG International based on the international projects and the societal difference that it makes in its projects.
All right. Thank you both for establishing that introduction. I want to jump right into the project now on fostering resilient crisis management. I want to first establish how do we define resilient crisis management, and why is it important, especially with St. Martin being a multi-sectoral environment? Elena, can you take us into that, please?
Yeah, of course. I think fostering resilient crisis management, it's so important, especially in a context as in St. Martin, where every year, of course, like even now during hurricane season, there's every year a chance that an event like a severe tropical storm or even a hurricane can happen. So then it is extremely important to keep the knowledge on how to deal with such disasters on par all the time. And that's what resilience is, I think, to be prepared at all times for such an event. And that means that there's a necessity to keep training government during the whole year and to keep that knowledge on how to deal with such a situation strongly embedded in the whole organization all the time, even though there might be years where luckily a large storm has not occurred.
Exactly, exactly. We can become very complacent, especially when periods of time goes by, and a storm does not affect you. But I think the mentality should be moving forward that, again, being conscious of the fact that you live 6 months out of the year in the hurricane season, that preparation should always be taking place, and that training should always be taking place. Marciano, explain, what is the Fostering Resilient Crisis Management Project, and what does it entail? Break that down for me, because I understand that it's a four-part or four-pillar type program. Give us some insight.
Of course. So the Fostering Resilient Crisis Management Project really aims at building the resilience in as many varied ways as possible. For example, we of course come now as an external party, and we try to focus on how to improve this process, but we also want the knowledge to actually remain on St. Martin. Therefore, one of the components focuses on training trainers, which means that the trainers will also have the capabilities to pass on this knowledge after this project is over. Of course, in the event of a crisis, you don't only want to be able to have to rely on your own country, but perhaps also on the surrounding islands. So regional collaboration will also become an important component. And for this, we are also giving several workshops and trainings regarding regional collaborations. Depending on the magnitude of the crisis at hand, you might have to look into what can you actually do and who do you need to activate. At times it might be with the police, at times with the fire department, or with certain ESFs, certain ministries. Well, there's a scaling structure for that, and for this we are also working together. And lastly, how do you share these informations during times of crisis? It needs to be quick. Sometimes you will not have all methods of communication available, let's say if there's no electricity or whatever. So in these cases, how do you share information, or what we call information management? That's the fourth pillar. And with these four pillars, we believe that we have the most comprehensive approach to fostering resilient crisis management.
Okay. Who are the various stakeholders involved in the Fostering Resilient Crisis Management Project? Eline.
Of course, the principal stakeholder is the government of St. Maarten. We work very closely with all departments of the government involved in disaster management. So within government, that's mainly the emergency support functions. They are the various groups within government that are activated once there is a crisis or disaster. And they all have a very specific focus on what to deal with during a hurricane. So some are, for example, more focused at the clearing the physical space, like clearing trees off the streets. Others are more focused on making sure that telecommunications keep functioning or are repaired as soon as possible. But these ESF groups also very importantly include the fire department, the police, the ambulance services. It's really the whole combination of all departments within government that participates in the efforts.
Can you both give me the opportunity to give us some insight or some examples of how you feel St. Martin can prioritize tasks and allocate resources during a crisis to ensure that effective crisis management can take place?
Yes, an example I would say that is necessary for prioritizing tasks is, as a government, you're of course responsible for everything in terms of governance, for how do you govern a country. It means that you have to prioritize, and for that, not always time will be available. However, something that should always be prioritized is definitely investing time and energy with all the preparedness activities. So that means within every group that is responsible for part of the crisis management, make sure you take the time to have training together, to communicate together about it. Make sure that when an event comes there, you are prepared, that you do all the exercises and all the trainings to make sure that when the time comes there, you know what you actually need to do.
Any points there that you'd like to share, Eline, on that same trajectory or that question?
Well, I think one of the important things we are working on together with the government is, for example, on an exercise training and education plan. So we've developed this together with fire department and government to really make a planning for each year. Like, okay, what are the standards trainings that should be part of the yearly program? And that is all geared toward what my colleague Marciano just said. Planning in such a way that knowledge and on this topic is on par all the time, and also then of course prioritizing to keep that planning up to date and to keep doing it. Yeah, but that depends really on the time and the energy that's made available for it. Yeah.
Yeah. For those that are just tuning in, I'm having a conversation with VNG International Project Managers, Ms. Eline Vermeer and Mr. Marciano Johns. Eline, strategies, tools, for those that are just tuning in. Let's just make sure we hone in on that. What strategies or tools can St. Martin use to assess and mitigate risks during a crisis?
One of the most important tools is communication. So I would really say if you in a disaster, there are so many different parties that are involved. There are all those ESF groups within government that are active. There are also external parties that come to support, and it is really a large task for government to be able to coordinate all these efforts. And also for everyone within government and outside to know, okay, what is happening exactly? How can I make sure that I am complementary to what all the others are doing, and that we don't do things double, or that the actions stop because we don't get enough information. So I'd really like to stress that tool, and that we're working on that together with governments to make sure that information sharing is done in a more structured manner, where all information is bundled in a central database, so that government staff can check up-to-date information at all times to be able to continue based on that. I think that is really the most important thing we're working on in this project when it comes to tools. Besides that, I would also like to say that we're working on a knowledge center, and that is more for as we say, the cold phase of a disaster. So when times are just normal, that there will be a space where all information on disaster management can be accessed. So, for example, the ESF sector plans or government strategies on how to deal with very specific disasters, that should all be in one place and accessible for the people who work with it.
Linda, thank you so much. Stay with us, St. Martin. I'm having a conversation once again with VNG International Project Managers, Mr. Marciano Johns and Ms. Eline Vermeer. Stay with us. We're talking about fostering resilient crisis management. In our second segment, we're going to get into, again, stressing why communication is so important and how we can foster a more unified approach towards any crisis that we might face. Stay tuned. You're Inside Government.
It's hurricane season. Are you prepared? Here are a few tips to remember to help keep you and your family safe. Hurricane winds can cause trees and branches to fall. So before hurricane strikes, trim or remove damaged trees and limbs to keep you and your property safe. This hurricane season, secure loose rain gutters and downspouts and clear any clogged areas or debris to prevent water damage to your property. This public service announcement was brought to you by the government of St. Martin.
You ever hear earthquake calling say, Hello, Mr. Mara, it's me. Earthquake are coming in Tuesday around 10. No, sir. Earthquake does arrive unannounced, and when it comes, it'll shake all the sense and the sensibility out of we. Remain calm, stay inside, and do the DCH. Drop, cover, hold on. Once the shaking start and you know it's an earthquake, make a quick move to a safe place. Don't run to the doorway or any exit, and the stairs that may be broke up or even full of people. Elevator, avoid that because you might get in and then poof, power gone, and you're stuck in a box without air. Take cover under a strong table or a bed, or crouch against an inside wall or in a corner and cover your face and your head with your arms. Remember, DCH. Drop, cover, hold on. Glass windows and doors, outside walls in an earthquake, that is bad news. Take care of yourself. Most injuries during earthquakes happen when something drops and hit people entering or exiting a building. Last thing, don't bother run outside and ask, you feel it? You feel it? Remain calm, stay indoors until all the shaking stop and do the DCH. Drop, cover, hold on.
This public service announcement was brought to you by Sedima and the Government of St. Martin.
St. Martin, if you're just tuning in, you're Inside Government. Welcome to the program. We're part of a 10-part series, and this is episode number 2, where we're talking about the introduction of fostering resilient crisis management, an exercise that the Government of St. Martin is undertaking with key stakeholder and partner VNG International that's involved in this training process. My guests in this edition are 2 project managers from VNG International, Mr. Marciano Johns and Ms. Eline Vermeer. And as we were talking about in the first segment, and if you're just tuning in, crisis situations always, puts the hammer down on communication. It always gets the blame in any crisis. How can we ensure timely, accurate information dissemination and effective communication with stakeholders, both internal and external, during a crisis? Marciano, your take on that?
Yes, so it's very understandable that communication sometimes can be a frustrating topic with a crisis. The faster or sooner you know something, the more you can do about this. Well, 2 of our components are really focused on how you have this effective communication. First of all, this information management. It really makes sure that in an easy way, all the stakeholders within government are able to find each other. Within government, we of course also mean the fire department, police, and the utility organization. But it's necessary that they can have all the information to act swiftly. Second of all, the scaling structure also means that every part of this crisis network knows exactly when they need to be activated and what they have to do. These are 2 ways that you can ensure that once a crisis happens, the information gets to those who need it as soon as possible.
So how can we foster collaboration, which is very essential? So we have the emergency support function groups. This is all internal. Then we have the external stakeholders. You could look at the harbor, airport, telecommunications, which still kind of serve within the emergency support function groups. They have their respective disciplines. So you tend to think this can get very, very confusing very, very quickly. But how can we foster good collaboration to ensure that we respond effectively as a country and as units coming together to deal with a crisis? What would your professional take be on that? Eline?
Well, it really, for me, I think it's just so important to keep meeting with each other also during the year and make sure that at all times, who is your counterpart at another organization that is involved in the crisis management. Of course, like everywhere around the world, people change functions as well, or change organizations, and then it's just so important to keep all contact details up to date. Of course, that sounds something like something simple, but really it can make such a big difference if it's done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to stay with you on this next question, Elena. I think it's right up in your expertise as a historian, and it's something that I've always been critical about in service to the country of the St. Martin, that past situations, past crises, serves as a very important aspect of teaching. Expand on that. How can past crises serve us today? in improving crisis management processes and procedures?
Of course, it's extremely interesting to look at to look at the analysis of how past crises have been dealt with. It can offer so many pointers on. Okay, this went very well last time. We need to focus more on keeping that element, and this went less well. We need to focus on really making it better. And as a historian, of course, I would say that an historical event never happens in the same way again. So in that sense, you can't plan for it completely. But still, I think it's a very, very worthwhile thing to do, to really dive into what happened before and try to learn from it. And those analyses are readily available, of course, of the past few hurricanes. And I think it's really interesting to keep those.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm a generation that represents 1995, where Lewis was one of the major storms, and a generation came and a generation went, and they did not understand. Every time we kept on talking about 1995, 1995, 1995, I could imagine the millennials who came on board at during this time were like, "Why do you guys keep on talking about that?" There's normally the sentiment that you would get. And then, hello, 2017 shows up, and here comes Irma with similar. Now, the persons who can say similar with those who experienced 1995. But there was some extra dynamics about Irma. Like you said, not every situation is the same. But the sensitization, I believe, when it comes to talking about past experiences, kind of gets you prepared mentally. To be able to take on the responsibility of anything that might come, but adjust yourself. How is adaptability important? This is like a side question. I want to get that take from both of you. How is adaptability important? Since every situation does not, it's not the same. So I'd like to get your take on that. Marciano, chime in there. How does adapting help us dealing with any type of crisis that we might face?
Adapting is also imperative for good crisis preparedness. This is something that we also try to show during the program. If you cannot adapt to certain situations, or if you only follow standard preparations, then perhaps you're not prepared for what's actually to come. We have these yearly HUREX exercises, of course, the hurricane exercise, where hurricane-themed crises are central. But what you may have seen during the last hurricane exercise is that we actually changed the scenario into somewhat of a crisis that was not necessarily a hurricane. Also to show that if you cannot adapt to the situation, then you might not be able to actually handle all different types of crises. So that is definitely a recurring theme.
Eline, your take.
And I think adding to that, it's also such a change of scenario is also to show that the general lines of how you deal with a disaster, they remain the same. Like you should know how to find your the right colleagues and do and keep your procedures, but adapting to another kind of crisis. But the structure still works. It works the same. And I think that it's also about practicing that. Like even in a different situation, keeping the structure.
Now, while this conversation, especially to the viewer and listener, might seem like as if we're talking about only things that government is working on, that is not the intention with this particular series of programming. We want you to also see yourselves as citizens of this country and being able to extract tips from the information being discussed and how you can foster resilient crisis management in your family planning. I want to get your take, Marciano and Eline, on this so that the viewer and listener, the person at home, that man on the street, can also connect to how fostering resilient crisis management can be applied within a family and household in their planning when it comes to hurricane season or in the face of any types of disaster, man-made or by Mother Nature. Marciano, let's take your input on that.
As you've mentioned, what we mainly do within this program, of course, has a big relation to the government and how it prepares it. However, communication can also make a difference there. When, for example, we have these national exercises or hurricane exercises, perhaps there can also be a moment for you as a family to put it in your calendar and say, this is also the week where we are going to go over our own preparedness, which can mean anything from which way do we make sure that we still have enough supplies, which way do we make sure that we have everybody's contact details that is necessary. Just making your own little exercises and having that fixed moment a year can already make a difference. Not saying that outside of that you shouldn't practice, but at least then you can make sure that as a country, as a family, you're all at the same time working on this preparedness.
Thank you, Marciano. Eline?
I agree completely with Marciano. I think besides that, of course, the government of St. Maarten puts a lot of effort in communicating also about what it does in disaster management. And I think it will be very, very good also for everyone living in St. Maarten to really try to keep following that and to be on top of what the government is doing.
This final question, how can government assist the public in managing the emotional and psychological impact of a crisis? What would your professional take be on that? Marciano?
So I believe that while the focus right now is very much on the operational side of things, the emotional side is also definitely important. And perhaps support from the government can come in certain yearly reoccurring events that can really focus on taking the time to talk about it. Because as you mentioned before, this talking about it, even though it might have happened years ago or for the 1995 case decades ago, it's still such an important way of increasing this preparedness. So showing that talking about it is necessary and actually organizing events related to that might make a big difference.
Eline?
Yeah, I'd like to look back a little bit also at the first project we did with St. Maarten, where we also focused on psychological preparedness. And in that program, we drafted protocols, for example, for first responders in the disaster, just for government also to be able to help people who were like in an ambulance or out on the streets, helping people, to help them to also recover after doing that important work. And I think those things are also things that government can play a big role in making sure that everybody who is officially involved, as in St. Maarten, who is also emotionally involved, because it's your own country. It's about. I think government can play a role there in making sure that first responders have access to psychological support for such a role.
VNG International Project Managers, Ms. Eline Vermeer and Mr. Marciano Johns, thank you so much for being our first-time guest and, of course, establishing this very important introduction to fostering resilient crisis management. Thank you so much for being a part of the program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to our radio listeners, television viewers, online viewers, thank you for tuning in and being a part of this 10-part series on fostering resilient crisis management. We hope that you are able to benefit from these conversations. If you've missed my conversation with Mr. Johns and Ms. Vermeer, be sure to catch video on demand at the Facebook page of the Government of St. Maarten at facebook.com/SXMGOV. Be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel of the Government of St. Maarten at youtube.com/Government of St. Maarten. And for audio playback, tune into St. Maarten Gov Radio 107.9 FM throughout the course of the day. On behalf of my colleagues at VNG International and, of course, all of us here at the Department of Communication, I'm Cedric Peterson. Thank you so much for tuning in.